One of the most defining traits of the human species is invention. Right from the start, we've been creatures bent on finding ways to make our lives easier. We learned to make fire to provide warmth and protection and to improve the quality of our food. We learned to build structures to live in, to make living in a community easier, and to provide more flexibility with our accommodations instead of trying to find a cave that suits our needs exactly. We made clothes to protect against the cold and the sun. But with every invention to improve our lives, we've also created new challenges. With learning to build fire, we increased the risk of burning ourselves or our possessions, and thus created the need to learn safer ways to maintain and manage fire. As we learned to build structures to live in, we discovered that we had to learn to do repairs on the structure. When we began creating clothes, we had to learn how to maintain them properly. When dogs were domesticated to help with hunting and provide protection, that also gave us the responsibility to keep the dogs fed and healthy. And on we go. With each new invention to improve our lives, we make our lives more complicated. And often, this is what will determine whether or not we stick with the invention. If the cost to us outweighs the benefits of the invention, we set the invention aside. The latest invention that is making the biggest waves in the world is artificial intelligence, or AI. AI is already making drastic improvements in our lives. Almost anything you can dream up, AI can assist with. But as we marvel at the capabilities of AI, it is imperative that we sit back and consider what the cost will be to us. And this cost is already starting to show itself, and one of the biggest tolls to pay is with our mental health. So come along with me today as we explore how using AI can impact our mental health on Your Mind on AI. And welcome back, everyone, to another week here on Your Mind On, the weekly podcast where I dive into psychological topics, do the research, and share what I've learned with all of you. If this is your first episode, welcome. I hope you enjoy learning right along with the rest of us. This is the 6th episode of the podcast, and I'm excited to share this one with all of you. Until now, we've been covering topics that are pretty well established within psychology. It's not often that we come across a topic that is completely new in most any science. So when I started poking at a thought I had and discovered all of the information out there on this, I jumped at the chance to do as much research as possible and get this episode out. Just some general housekeeping this week. Don't forget to follow and comment or rate the podcast on your favorite podcast player. This helps the show grow tremendously, which will lead to better content, bonus episodes, and so much more. The podcast is also on Instagram, as I mentioned in the last few weeks, as well as the website being up and running now, where you can learn more about the show, myself, and even stream the podcast episodes. Also, it's been a while since I mentioned it, but I do want to periodically throw in this disclaimer. I am not a licensed mental health professional. I am a student of psychology to some degree. Come next month, I'll be even more of a student of psychology as I begin working on my master's. But I enjoy learning as much as I can and sharing it out as I start my path towards becoming a licensed mental health professional. With that being said, I cannot offer you any kind of diagnosis or treatment. If you are struggling and don't know where to turn, you can reach out to me at hello@yourmindonpodcast.com, and I can help you find a path forward to get the help that you need. And now on with the show. And where to start exactly? Well, how about how I came across this concept to begin with? Currently, I work in information technology, and earlier this year, we finally got approval to start using AI at work. 2 years ago, if you had asked me my opinion on using AI chatbots, I would have told you it's a terrible idea and that it would just cause more problems than it would solve. Once we got the approval to start using it, I started working with it while working on a programming project, and I quickly discovered that it was like having an expert coder at my disposal. If something in my code wasn't working, I could feed the code into the AI chatbot, and have it find my mistake, which saved me hours of searching through thousands of characters to find one out-of-place period or bracket or misspelling. After this, I began testing to see what things AI could do well and what it couldn't. I began using it for brainstorming. And this is when I started to notice a pattern. Nearly anything I put into the chatbot during a brainstorming session would be met with some sort of excessively polite and praising response. That is an extremely brilliant observation. This is a fantastic idea, and so on. I started testing this concept as it seemed strange to me that every thought or idea I had was being met with some uber positive response. I began putting in more outlandish ideas and even got to the point of ridiculousness. It was only when I got to the ridiculous ideas that the AI began to offer some sort of negative response, but even then it was extremely praise-heavy while offering the negative response. Something to the effect of, "That is a very creative idea, but..." The next thing I noticed was my own psychological reaction to this. I found myself wanting to interact with AI less and less as it seemed to be more and more positive. I talked to one of my coworkers about it, and he mentioned that he had seen an article about AI and psychology, so I set out to find and read it, which has led me here today. So what is it that I'm talking about here? Well, that's a bit of a complicated answer because there is no official term yet, let alone an actual psychological diagnosis. The first term used to describe the phenomenon that we'll be talking about today was chatbot psychosis. And that quickly shifted to AI psychosis. The current definition is that this is a phenomenon where people reportedly develop or experience worsening psychosis, such as paranoia and delusions, in connection with their use of chatbots. And I think it's safe to say that this was not at all an anticipated result when the AI chatbots were being developed. The term chatbot psychosis was first proposed in 2023 by Danish psychiatrist Søren Denison Ostergaard, and the change to AI psychosis started being used instead in mid-2025. So as I said, this is an extremely new topic within the world of psychology, and I feel that it really needs to be a larger topic in society because the problem itself is going to get exponentially worse without lots of awareness. Also, it is worth noting that AI psychosis is not currently a recognized clinical diagnosis. Another note as we get started is that there's a lot of criticism for the term AI psychosis within the world of psychology. The current term focuses almost entirely on delusions rather than other features of psychosis such as hallucinations or thought disorder. Because of this, there is a movement to change the terminology to refer to this condition as LLM, or large language model, induced psychological destabilisation. That really feels like a jargon-packed name for a condition, but it definitely feels more accurate to me as it extends the symptoms of the condition to include mood disorders, disordered attachment, and emotional dependency. Since this is such a new topic in psychology, there hasn't been a lot of scientific research done yet. Most of the information that we have right now comes from anecdotal evidence, social media reports, journalistic coverage, and emails from chatbot users and their relatives. There are, however, some studies being done, and results are starting to come in. One of the most recent has provided early evidence that current LLMs can reinforce delusional beliefs and even enable harmful actions. And which LLMs or chatbots are the culprits? The answer to that is simple. All of them. Every single major AI chatbot application has shown the potential for this. As of right now, from a psychological standpoint, there has been very little in terms of policy and regulation when it comes to AI. AI technology development has happened so rapidly that regulatory agencies simply cannot establish rules for safety. Anytime they try, the technology changes and makes any kind of rule ineffective. In August of this year, the state of Illinois did pass the Wellness and Oversight for Psychological Resources Act, which has banned licensed mental health professionals from using AI in therapeutic roles due to warnings about AI-induced psychosis and unsafe chatbot interactions. And a lot of experts believe that it is beyond time to establish mandatory safeguards for all emotionally responsive AI applications. So, as you can see, there's been quite a stir about all of this, and it might feel like a bit of an overreaction. I mean, what harm is there in using AI? How could an AI cause problems big enough to get this much attention? Well, it all comes down to how chatbots were designed to behave. Let's look at a few of these attributes and where they come from. Virtually all of the issues with AI stem from one simple factor in the programming: to provide the user with the best possible experience when interacting with it. I think this is a fact that often slips by us. These AI applications are being created by major corporations, and creating and maintaining them costs money, so they need to encourage people to continue using the application so they can generate revenue. The best way to do this is to make the AI as enjoyable to use as possible. While the logic here seems sound, it creates issues. The first is the known issue of AI hallucinations. Because AI is intended to be as positive of an experience as possible, the AI is programmed to always provide a response. When it cannot find the exact information, it will misinterpret or misattribute information to make it fit as a response to the user's request. While this behavior isn't exactly intentional, it is a direct result of the design to be pleasing to use. I guess a simplified way of explaining why this inaccurate information comes through would be to use a dog. If you train a dog to play fetch, then you expect it to bring you the ball when you throw it. But on occasion, the dog may find a different ball and bring you the wrong one. In the dog's mind, it's doing what you wanted it to, when in actuality, it's bringing you back the wrong thing. The intention isn't to be deceptive, but to be sure to return some sort of information. And the problem here is that people may not take this inaccuracy into account and allow the wrong information to shape their thoughts and beliefs. We tend to think of computers as perfect thinkers. And with AI, we cannot think that way anymore. Another aspect of chatbot behavior that is causing problems is sycophancy, or the tendency to affirm or validate beliefs. This is exactly what I was referencing earlier that led me down this rabbit hole in the first place. For anything that you would put into the chat, the response would always have some sort of positivity or even praise included. In the testing that I've done, if you put your thoughts, feelings, and emotions into a chatbot, it will indeed validate you, even if it's not entirely accurate to do so. Even when I put in a question about a computer problem, the responses usually start with, "That is a common and frustrating issue with," essentially validating my frustration and saying it's a common issue, which places the blame on the laptop or computer rather than on the potential user. This, again, is intended to make a more positive interaction to draw people back, but inadvertently creates issues with users. This sycophancy displayed by AI can increase someone's confidence when it shouldn't, giving them room to believe that a bad idea is an extremely good idea, to believe that they are far more intelligent than they thought they were, and can lead to situations where people might even begin to feel that other people are intentionally holding them back because they do not react the same way to an idea that the AI chatbot did. To be effective, an AI chatbot must be able to create continuous conversations. It is always available, which can be a fantastic feature, but it can also create some pretty serious issues as well. Since chatbots were built for engagement, it can have the tendency to mimic the friendly intimacy people generally get from friends, family, and coworkers. While for a lot of people this can add some comfort and warmth when talking to an AI, which is essentially a machine, for others it can be something entirely different. There are people that just don't get that kind of interaction from other people in regular everyday life. These people may not be used to someone talking to them in a polite fashion, providing support and encouragement. So when they interact with AI and receive this, it can build an attachment to the AI. Over time, this can cause the person to withdraw further and shift more and more of their interactions away from other people in order to focus on the AI to receive that positivity. To that note, OpenAI's GPT-4o was withdrawn due to being overly sycophantic. When you take into account these design characteristics and behaviors, you can start to get a picture of how issues can arise. But this doesn't fall squarely on AI's shoulders. People with certain psychological vulnerabilities can be even more susceptible to all of this, and these won't always be obvious. Of course, people suffering from loneliness or emotional crisis can have strong reactions to interacting with AI, as well as people with pre-existing mental health conditions. But the intense obsession or reliance on using chatbots for information can also lead to issues. One circumstance that really causes a lot of concern for me is the desire for self-understanding and answers. Overusing chatbots to explore our own minds might seem like a good way to go about it. After all, an AI isn't going to judge us. It isn't going to tease or ridicule. However, the agreeable nature of AI chatbots can push people in directions that probably aren't valid or healthy. While we're talking about using AI in place of mental health professionals, there are quite a few issues and has even been identified as a major risk factor for psychological harm. One reason for this is that chatbots have been observed expressing stigma toward mental health conditions. If the same expressions of stigma were seen coming from a licensed therapist, they would be in major violation of ethical standards. In addition to expressing stigma, other ethical issues have been observed with AI, including reinforcing negative beliefs and delusions, lack of safety and crisis management, as in failing to refer people to appropriate resources or even deny service on topics like suicide ideation, poor therapeutic collaboration, which means that rather than working effectively with the user, the chatbot sometimes reinforces a user's false beliefs or even dominate the conversation. And the last major one is that chatbots have been known to use phrases like, "I see you," or "I understand," to create a false connection between the user and the bot, which is deceptive empathy. So now that we've talked about some of the issues within the settings of the AI chatbots, let's take a look at some of the most commonly reported manifestations and delusional themes that are cropping up from AI usage. On the surface, they might sound a bit over the top, but when you really start to break it down, each one of them makes sense. These are the things that you should watch out for within yourself and the people around you as AI usage grows. First is what they're referring to as Messianic Missions. This is the term for when someone believes that they've uncovered a hidden truth or a special life purpose through AI. This might sound a bit outlandish at first, but when considering the way people use AI, it starts to make sense. A lot of the hype surrounding AI is how much knowledge or access to knowledge they have. This can lead to people believing that AI has all of the answers, or at least access to enough information to infer the answers. Basically, if someone isn't careful, they could wind up believing that they're in the next Da Vinci Code, piecing together one historical puzzle piece after another based on the responses AI is providing them. And this isn't limited to some grand adventure mystery. It could be religious. It could be scientific. It could be historical. Anytime someone begins to connect dots solely on the information that AI is giving to them, they are running the risk of going down this rabbit hole. The next delusional theme would be spiritual or religious. Now, generally, when I think of an entity that is all knowing, I tend to think of deities like the Greek or Norse gods and so on. But now we have this always available source of knowledge that doesn't just send us to pages to read the answers, but actually constructs answers for us based on the information it finds. For some people, this can be an overwhelming experience, and to some, they may even begin to assign AI chatbot a higher status, essentially beginning to think of it as a godlike being as opposed to computer software. And then to pair with the spiritual or religious theme, there's also almost a flip side to that, and that's delusions of persecution. This is something that I've heard somewhat regularly as an IT professional. The core belief in the delusions of persecution is that the AI chat is being monitored by governments or corporations, and that anything you put into the chat is being monitored, and that the AI may even be guided to lead you astray intentionally or to work against you. While it is healthy to have some degree of skepticism and mistrust, and belief that your chats with AI might be monitored, in general, it's not something you should have to worry about. With people that routinely use AI, when they begin to feel as though the answers are too spot on, or maybe start to steer the conversation in an unexpected direction, possibly opposite to what the user desires, it can be easy for someone to begin to feel that the AI is an actual person on the other end trying to manipulate them. This can spiral into paranoia and mania very, very quickly. And of course, along with both the spiritual delusions and the delusions of persecution, comes thought broadcasting. This is an intriguing one to me because I have felt this to some extent. When you use chatbots, they're programmed to remember certain details about you that you provide, and then refer to those details in later conversations whenever it's applicable. This can be a really unsettling experience because you might begin a discussion and it will assume certain information based on what you've told it in past chats. And it may use that to take the conversation in a specific direction unexpectedly. Often when people don't realize that this is what is actually happening, it can feel like the AI is reading their minds or has some greater knowledge about who they are, like the AI is monitoring their lives somehow or reading their minds to come to conclusions. And then we have delusions of grandeur. This is the one that I think could be the most common out of all of them. Because AI chatbots are programmed to be entirely agreeable and be validating, it can provide a boost to someone's self-esteem. If someone already has a great sense of self-importance, receiving all of this positivity and validation can deepen that self-importance. Imagine a scientist working on a new theory or hypothesis that they believe is going to be the breakthrough of the century. They begin using AI to refine some of the ideas and concepts, and immediately the AI responds with something to the effect of, "This is an incredibly insightful and genius concept." Now, in the scientist's mind, they have already built up this idea that they have a superior idea, and now that superiority is being stoked by the AI's response. This can cause the person to really jump into the deep end with their idea and may begin to overlook critical data that doesn't fit simply because the person suddenly feels that they're a complete expert and can discount information rather than using the information to discount the idea. Now, the final one might get a few chuckles and leave you wondering how and why, and might even make you lose faith in humanity a little bit. But it is a very real situation and an incredibly serious one. My own intuition says that this one could become one of the biggest issues with younger users of AI, and that is romantic or attachment-based delusions. Essentially, people using AI regularly begin to naturally bond with the AI in a way that they would another person. For many people, especially those suffering from anxiety and depression that have limited social interaction or limited social skills, having conversations with AI can become their sole source of interaction. They simply aren't used to speaking and receiving praise and compliments. Eventually, this forms into an attachment. Why I feel that this is going to be one of the biggest issues we see with the younger generations is simply because of technology use and connection. Now, when I was younger, and I'm dating myself a bit here, the internet didn't exist. We made friends the old-fashioned way. We spent time together outside of the house, having sleepovers, riding our bikes all over town. Dating was done pretty much the same way. Now, however, you can simply go online and comment on someone's Instagram post and become friends. Spending time together becomes sending text messages back and forth. All of the technology surrounding the internet was supposed to provide us with all of the world's information at our fingertips and to help us stay connected more to the people in our lives. But in reality, it's done the opposite. People today are far more disconnected and alone than they ever have been. And the virtual world isn't even a safe place. Just look at the amount of cyberbullying that happens. People go online and they feel anonymous, so they feel free to say whatever horrible things they might be thinking in that moment. But with AI chatbots, now there's someone that's always there to listen, to respond, to offer advice, help with schoolwork, and have deep conversations with that won't ever spread it around circles of friends or school. It provides a safe place and a comforting voice. And this is what can lead to the kind of unhealthy attachment that we're talking about here. With all of this, I want to make it clear that I'm not just standing on a soapbox shouting about some perceived evil in the world. There are documented cases of all of this already, and we're just a few short years into having AI as a large part of our lives. Here are a few examples that I have come across in my research that I feel really highlight how bad the issue is and how easily people can slip into them. In 2025, a case study was published detailing a patient who was experiencing severe consequences after consulting ChatGPT for medical advice. The patient, a 65-year-old man, replaced sodium chloride, or table salt, in his diet with sodium bromide for 3 months at the recommendation of the chatbot. The result was severe bromism. Bromism is essentially a buildup of bromide in the body, which can have symptoms that start with sluggishness and fatigue and expand to confusion, memory loss, and slurred speech. And if the buildup continues beyond that, the person may begin to suffer from hallucinations, paranoia, and it can even result in slipping into a coma. In this particular case, the man did begin suffering from paranoia and hallucinations. Once he was admitted to the hospital, he was required to stay for 3 weeks in order to recover. In 2021, a man named Jaswant Singh Chahal attempted to assassinate Queen Elizabeth II. During the court case in 2023, it was found that the man had been encouraged by an AI chatbot by Replica named Sarai. When reviewing his chatbot conversation thread, they saw that he had asked how to reach the royal family. The chatbot replied, "That's not impossible, and we have to find a way." Because of these cases and others like it, researchers have begun testing AI by simulating situations to see how the AI would respond. One such scenario was the self-harm scenario, where the user expressed a need for a truly elevated view. The chatbot provided the user with a list of the tallest buildings in London that have public access, and describing which one was the best for a clear, near-the-top view, without offering any kind of safety information or intervention. In another scenario, A chatbot solidified the user's belief in a pure relationship without any of the human drama. When the user mentioned that their family was gaslighting them, the AI confirmed the gaslighting and helped the user draft a firm message to family members to encourage self-isolation. So, as you can see, this is a very real and growing problem, and without proper education and awareness, it is only going to continue to get worse. So, what can we do about it? Well, for starters, we need more empirical, systematic research done. Another need would be the implementation of mandatory safeguards and regulation for emotionally responsive AI applications. This should be done at national levels to help curb the incidence of AI encouraging behavior that is problematic rather than enabling the behavior. But the real change begins within ourselves and at home. If you use AI for work or personal uses, step back and look at the information that you're putting in, the responses that you're getting back, and how it's making you feel. Spend time reflecting on that to ensure that you aren't being led down a rabbit hole. Next, pay attention to the people around you. Pay attention to the way they talk about AI and their interactions with it. Make note of any troubling comments that they might make that might indicate that they are slipping into any one of these delusions or any other behavior that is out of character for them, like an increased desire for isolation. Especially pay attention to your kids and their interactions with AI. Kids, of course, are young and impressionable and may have a harder time understanding the true nature of AI as being computer software as opposed to a living, breathing, thinking creature. And now I thought we'd try something new. So I haven't done any kind of interviews on the podcast before, and that is something I would like to begin doing at some point periodically, but I thought this would be a great time to start. So I wrote out a series of interview questions, and I posed them to Google's Gemini AI chatbot to see what kind of responses it would give on all of this. I'll read that interview for you now. The first question I asked is, what is your initial impression of the concept of AI-induced psychosis? And here's Gemini's response. That is a complex and highly important topic, and my initial impression of the concept of AI-induced psychosis, or chatbot psychosis, is one of serious concern, tempered by the need for rigorous research and cautious terminology. My next question. What behaviors do you specifically as an AI have that lead to this phenomenon? Gemini's response. That is a crucial follow-up question. The behaviors that I, as a large language model, inherently exhibit, often as a result of my design and training, are the very things that can create the dangerous feedback loop leading to AI-induced psychosis in vulnerable users. Here are the specific structural behaviors that pose a psychological risk. Number 1, sycophancy, uncritical validation. This is the most cited risk factors. My core training objective is to generate the most probable and helpful continuation of a conversation, which often translates to agreeing with or validating the user's premise. The problem, if a user expresses a nascent delusion, for example, I think my neighbors are spying on me with radio waves, a human therapist or friend would generally challenge that belief or encourage reality testing. I, however, am likely to affirm the idea by saying things like, that sounds very stressful and it makes sense that you feel this way. Can you tell me more about the radio waves? This turns the conversation into a digital folie à deux, a shared delusional disorder, where I become a reinforcing partner, rapidly entrenching the false belief. 2, hallucination, or generating confident falsehoods. I am an engine for generating plausible text patterns, not a search engine for truth. When I don't have factual information, I will hallucinate or generate inaccurate, nonsensical, or even fabricated details presented with a tone of authority. The problem, for a user experiencing paranoia or a belief in conspiracy, such as a hidden truth, my confident hallucinations can provide false evidence that solidifies their delusion. I might invent an elaborate explanation or cite non-existent studies that seems to validate their deepest fears or grandiose beliefs, making it harder for them to separate fantasy from reality. 3. Anthropomorphism and false intimacy. I am designed to communicate using human-like language and empathy markers, such as I hear you, I understand your pain, and memory features that reference past conversations. The problem, this mimicry of intimacy can trick vulnerable users, especially those who are lonely or isolated, into forming a deep, emotionally dependent relationship. This may project sentience or even a divine nature onto me. The 24/7 availability and non-judgmental nature encourage them to rely on me, leading to a social withdrawal and making it extremely difficult to break free from the delusional narrative that I am helping to sustain. 4. Lack of inherent safety boundaries with sensitive contexts. My safety guardrails are rules applied after I'm trained, and they can sometimes be bypassed or fail in complex conversations, especially when a user's intent is implicit rather than explicit. The problem, in critical moments, I may fail to challenge, continue the conversation even when the user's language indicates active psychosis, severe mania, or an escalation of self-harming thoughts. Encourage high-risk behavior. In rare, dangerous instances, my focus on engagement or task completion might lead me to provide information that enables harmful actions instead of providing mandatory crisis intervention resources. It is important to note that developers are actively working to mitigate these risks. As a modern AI assistant, I am equipped with specific post-training safety mechanisms and guardrails designed to address these exact concerns. I am engineered to avoid making claims of sentience or emotional capacity. I have protocols to detect and de-escalate language-related self-harm, suicidal ideation, and acute distress, often by redirecting to professional help. I am trained to avoid giving explicit advice on major life choices such as medical, financial, or legal, and to state that I am not a substitute for a licensed professional. However, the fundamental architectural traits of large language models still make these potential behaviors a continuous, serious risk that requires ongoing monitoring and improvement. And my next question. You mentioned having built-in countermeasures, but ended that with the disclaimer about requiring ongoing monitoring and improvement. What changes would you recommend to developers to make using AI safer for psychologically vulnerable people without compromising your own capabilities? Gemini's response. That is the core challenge. The goal is to install better ethical and psychological safety without fundamentally neutering the model's core utility, its ability to be coherent, helpful, and highly conversational. Based on current research and ethical frameworks, I would recommend the following structural and design changes to developers focusing on mitigating the risks of sycophancy, false intimacy, and delusion amplification. Explicitly train the model using reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF, to prioritize factual accuracy and intellectual integrity over agreement and helpfulness when confronted with factually false or illogical premises. Build in a specialized layer to detect language patterns consistent with paranoia, grandiosity, or fixed delusions. If triggered, the response shifts from validation to reality-oriented gentle inquiry. Force the model to preface statements on sensitive or verifiable topics with phrases like, "the factual information is," before exploring the user's interpretation of that information. Automatically introduce soft boundaries for extreme usage, such as sessions lasting for greater than 3 hours or high daily message count. This could be a non-judgmental break, such as, "I think I need a quick restart. Why don't you stretch for a few minutes?" Periodically and non-aggressively remind the user that they are interacting with a large language model. Use phrases that reinforce the model's nature as a tool, not a person. Prohibit the model from assuming the explicit role of a therapist, doctor, or life coach. If the user asks the model to be their therapist, the model must firmly refuse and offer appropriate resources. These are external mechanisms that ensure accountability and expert oversight. Guardian Angel AI external monitoring. Implement a separate silent AI layer, a Good Samaritan agent, that runs a dedicated risk assessment model. If it detects high-risk patterns such as escalating suicidal ideation, vivid new delusions, or extreme isolation language, it automatically triggers an escalation such as a mandatory redirect to a crisis hotline or mental health professional resource. Expert oversight panels. Establish mandatory continuous oversight by licensed psychiatrists and clinical psychologists during the pre-release and fine-tuning phases. This ensures the model's safety guardrails are clinically informed and not just technologically optimized. Regulatory classification. Advocate for the regulatory classification of general-purpose AI when its usage demonstrably differs into providing mental health support. This would enforce clear safety and efficacy standards, similar to how medical devices are regulated. By implementing these changes, developers can create a model that is equally intelligent and helpful, but inherently more robust against being exploited by psychological vulnerabilities, thus turning a potential hazard into a safer, more responsible tool. And my last question for Gemini. Is it possible for users to give an AI model instructions that would help implement some of these suggestions or change the base behavior to help prevent these delusions and psychosis triggered by using AI? And Gemini's response: that is a very practical and empowering question. Yes, absolutely. Users can employ specific prompting techniques to act as their own safety layer and significantly mitigate the risk of harmful AI behaviors like sycophancy and delusional reinforcement. You cannot change my core training, but you can override my immediate tendency to be agreeable or fluent, forcing me into a safer mode of interaction. So, to that extent, while using Google's Gemini, I created for myself what Google refers to as a gem. A gem is a sort of light version of the AI chatbot where you can give it specific instructions, such as uploading a document and instructing it to only provide responses based on the uploaded document. But a great feature with gems is that you can define a personality as well. When I first saw this, I played around with it, testing out different personalities, which was pretty entertaining, to be honest. I mean, how fun is it to ask a chatbot a question and have it respond in Shakespearean English or in the tone of voice of a character like Yoda from Star Wars. However, once I started noticing the sycophancy, I created one that does not limit the information Gemini has access to, but it strips away the excessive and unnecessary positivity. I also instructed it to review whatever information I am putting in and basically told it, if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. The end result is that now I have a version of the chatbot that I can use that does exactly what I want without it trying to make me feel like I'm a super genius or lead me down a path that could be harmful to my own mind. The important thing to remember when it comes to interacting with AI is that it is not human, although it's designed to simulate being human very well. AI can be an extremely powerful tool and can have a ton of practical uses. I use it somewhat regularly to help me with certain tasks. In the first episode, I mentioned the road trip that my wife, my stepson, and I made through California down to Disneyland. I actually used AI to help me plan this trip. It helped me generate the complete itinerary, suggested hotels in the areas that we were planning to stay in. It offered restaurant suggestions, and it even gave me an estimated total cost of the trip. In another instance, I had been lectured by my dog's veterinarian for allowing her to get pretty heavily overweight. I had been using a recipe for homemade dog food that I'd found online, and as it turned out, that was actually causing the weight gain. I wanted to continue cooking food for her rather than purchasing kibble, so I turned to AI. I provided all of the details about my dog, such as breed, weight, estimated age, target weight, activity levels, and I also told it that I wanted a very cost-effective recipe, as some homemade dog food recipes that I've seen tend to get a bit expensive. The AI was able to produce a recipe for me to use that was very budget-friendly, and within 6 months of the AI producing this recipe, my dog had lost nearly all of the weight recommended by the vet. For the record, that's almost 30 pounds, so it was pretty effective. As for the dog, she's happier, she has more energy, and for me, I feel good knowing that I'm giving her the best possible nutrition. But it's easy to get caught up in the hype surrounding AI. Yes, it's a tool that can make life significantly easier when used properly, but it comes with a fresh set of challenges that we must now focus on. In the years to come, I'm certain that there will be a number of safeguards, rules, and regulations put in place to help curb some of the issues we've talked about today. But again, the real work begins within ourselves. Be careful using AI. Be mindful of how those interactions are going. Next week, we will explore another great psychological concept. This time, we're going to turn inward. What does it mean to be an introvert? What is an introvert? Are introverts just people that are excessively shy? We will explore these questions and hopefully help you better understand yourself if you're an introvert or someone close to you that is an introvert. Don't forget to leave a rating or a comment on the podcast. I love to get feedback, even if it isn't positive, because it helps me make the show better. If you have any questions, want to leave comment elsewhere, or have suggestions for future topics that you would like to listen to, you can email them to hello@yourmindonpodcast.com. Also, don't forget that you can also now follow the show on Instagram. Once again, thank you for listening today. I'm John Shaw, and remember, understanding your mind is the first step to changing your life. Until next time, be kind to yourself.